Emily Carter had owned her dream house for only 11 quiet days before everything shifted on the 12th. She woke that morning expecting sunlight and silence, but sensed an unfamiliar weight in the air instead. The walls felt closer, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Emily tried to ignore the unease, telling herself that fear had no place in a home she earned alone. But a single phone call from her mother would soon fracture that small sense of peace completely. The voice on the line trembled with urgency, asking for help, asking for space, asking to stay a short while. Emily agreed, unaware that this moment would open a door she could never close again. She did not yet know that the 12th day would be the last day the house truly belonged to her. Emily expected her mother to arrive with a single suitcase, maybe two, nothing more than a temporary burden. Instead, a U-Haul truck rumbled into her driveway like an omen she failed to read in time. Frank stepped out first, wearing sunglasses and a grin that felt too familiar for a man she barely knew. Linda followed behind him, apologizing softly, claiming the move was only for a few weeks at most. Emily nodded, trying to quiet the unease already spreading like cold water under her ribs. The truck door rolled open and revealed boxes stacked to the ceiling, furniture she had never seen before. Emily told herself it was fine, that kindness was easier than conflict, that family deserved a chance. But every item unloaded felt like another piece of her space being carved away without permission. Frank directed the movers as if he owned the property, pointing at the porch and garage like a foreman. Emily hesitated before reminding him the garage was already full, but he waved her off casually. He said he would handle it, and within minutes her tools and storage bins were shoved into a corner. Linda kept thanking Emily, but her voice was thin, as if she feared upsetting the man beside her. Emily carried small boxes, while Frank carried large ones, taking the lead through doorways she once claimed. By evening, the hallway was crowded with unfamiliar belongings that smelled of someone else's life. Emily tried to maintain patience, telling herself the mess was temporary, just part of helping family in need. But the first sign arrived when Frank opened the fridge and rearranged everything inside without asking. He moved Emily's food to the lower shelves, stacking his bags on top with territorial precision. He asked her where the spare keys were, not as a question, but as an expectation she should fulfill. Emily said she didn't have extras, though she did, feeling foolish for lying in her own home. Frank shrugged, saying he would make new copies and that every adult in the house needed access. The word household struck her, heavy and wrong, as if he was rewriting the language of ownership. That night, Emily tried to reclaim her comfort by making tea, but even the kitchen felt altered. Frank had moved the mugs to a different cabinet and left his muddy boots beside the dishwasher. Linda sat at the table, whispering reassurances that everything would settle once Frank found new work. Emily forced a smile, though her throat felt tight with the fear she refused to name aloud. When she went to bed, she heard Frank packing the hallway, inspecting the rooms like a landlord. He opened the laundry closet, the linen cabinet, the basement door, each click echoing through her nerves. Emily stared at the ceiling, wondering how a favor could already feel like an invasion. She reminded herself that families struggle, and kindness is sometimes inconvenient but still necessary. Yet as she listened to drawers opening in the guest room, she felt the first sharp edge of regret. The house no longer sounded like her sanctuary, but like a space being claimed inch by inch. And though she didn't admit it yet, Emily sensed that Frank had not moved in for a few weeks. He had arrived like someone settling into a place he intended to stay far longer than invited. Frank began his takeover quietly, slipping into routines that reshaped the house without Emily's consent. He woke before sunrise and marched through the hallway like a man inspecting property he intended to claim. Emily heard him rattling vents, pulling at door frames, muttering about repairs she never asked for. He said the porch steps were unsafe and tore off a board before she could protest or understand his plan. Linda stood beside him nodding, as if destruction was simply another form of kindness being offered. Emily tried to intervene, but Frank dismissed her concerns with a laugh that felt sharp and condescending. He told her homeowners needed a man's hand to keep things in proper order, as if she were only borrowing. The phrase stung, lingering in the air long after he carried his tools back inside the living room. Soon the living room itself transformed into his command center, filled with cables, loud radios, and clutter. He pushed Emily's books aside, placing his toolbox on her coffee table like a permanent fixture. The sofa she loved turned into his napping spot, stained with oil from his work clothes. Emily tried to suggest boundaries, but Frank interrupted before she finished a single sentence. He said everyone needed shared space, especially during family transitions, a phrase he repeated often. Emily noticed her mother echoing his words, as if repeating them made them true. Frank invited 2 friends over without warning and turned the house into a weekend workshop. The men drank beer in the backyard, stomping across the grass Emily had just reseeded weeks before. Their trucks blocked the driveway, and one parked on the lawn, crushing the soil beneath heavy tires. Emily asked them to move, but Frank stepped in and told her not to overreact about landscaping. He said the yard was just dirt, as if the effort she put into it meant nothing at all. Inside, he moved her framed photos to a storage box, claiming he needed wall space for his tools. Emily found her belongings neatly stacked in corners, pushed aside to make room for his projects. Her kitchen towels were replaced with his old rags, and her candles were shoved into drawers. Even the air smelled different, carrying the scent of grease, tobacco, and something foreign. Frank spoke with the tone of a landlord, telling her which lights she should turn off to save money. He adjusted the thermostat without asking, scolding her for running the heater too generously. Emily tried to reclaim small pieces of control, but every effort met resistance or mocking laughter. He announced he would repaint the hallway and bought supplies without consulting her. Emily reminded him it was her house, but he waved the comment off like a trivial mistake. He said families shouldn't focus on ownership and that the home belonged to everyone under its roof. Linda nodded again, quietly aligning herself with his statements, avoiding Emily's pleading eyes. One evening, Emily returned from work to find Frank moving furniture in the guest room. He said he needed an office and that the space was wasted on storage and occasional visitors. Emily reminded him the room was hers, but he brushed past her, muttering that she needed to adapt. The words carved deeply, leaving her breathless with the realization that this was no longer temporary. Every day, Frank expanded his reach while Emily's world shrank into corners she struggled to protect. She felt herself becoming a guest inside walls she once believed would always be safe. Frank began telling neighbors that the house was a family property, not solely Emily's. He claimed Emily only had her name on the deed for convenience, as if that erased her ownership. Emily overheard him boasting at a block party, laughing as he described the home as our joint investment. Linda rarely intervened, nodding quietly or changing the subject whenever Emily tried to correct him. Frank invited friends and distant relatives over, repeating the same story about shared ownership. He told them Emily was selfish and ungrateful, painting himself as the victim trying to protect family. Emily tried to speak up, but Frank talked over her, laughing at her protests as if they were childish. At one gathering, he blocked her path to the kitchen, placing a hand on the counter like a barrier. Emily felt her words disappear into the air, unheard or ignored, as Frank rewrote the narrative. He told her friends she had no idea about real responsibility, implying he was the wiser adult. Linda occasionally echoed him, repeating phrases that diminished Emily's authority in her own home. Frank said Emily's decisions were temporary, while he claimed a permanent say in the household. Emily noticed how he emphasized the word family, twisting it to justify his control over her space. He even suggested that the home should reflect his tastes, rearranging furniture to suit himself. Emily's attempts to assert boundaries were met with laughter or subtle mockery. Frank told neighbors that she was difficult to live with, framing her concerns as overreactions. When distant relatives visited, he would tell them she was inexperienced in handling adult responsibilities. Emily watched as he skewed every story, turning minor disagreements into proof of her alleged selfishness. Frank said the house had been in the family spirit for years, though Emily alone held legal ownership. He introduced the idea that decisions required his approval, calling it family consensus. Emily's mother rarely disagreed, nodding silently or offering weak excuses for his behavior. Frank invited a friend for drinks in the living room and claimed Emily approved, even though she hadn't. He positioned himself as the decision-maker for repairs, parties, and household schedules. Emily realized everyone around her had begun seeing the home through his narrative, not hers. Frank said Emily was lucky he was there to keep things orderly, implying she could not manage alone. He told neighbors that she would soon understand how real families function and need guidance. Emily felt herself shrinking, losing the authority she had worked years to achieve. Frank's words were not only false but convincing, eroding the trust of anyone who visited. He suggested she defer to him on legal matters, saying she didn't know how property disputes worked. Linda sometimes added that Emily should listen more, reinforcing Frank's claim to control. Emily noticed how he would smile after each story, clearly enjoying the power of shaping perception. He told the mail carrier and delivery drivers that packages should be checked with him first. Emily realized that social manipulation had become as dangerous as the physical takeover. Frank's constant reframing of reality made Emily doubt if anyone outside the house would support her. He told neighbors that Emily had inherited habits from her father, framing her personality as flawed. Emily tried to record conversations quietly, gathering proof of his lies for the future. Frank often claimed she was incapable of running a household responsibly and would never understand. He told her friends, "I know what's best for everyone," as if she had no say in her own home. Emily began planning silently, knowing she needed evidence to counteract the stories he spread. Frank's influence seeped into every corner of her social circle, leaving Emily feeling isolated and misrepresented. She realized social manipulation could become a weapon as sharp as any physical intrusion. Frank had turned her own home into a stage for his performance, with Emily cast as the villain. The constant storytelling and distortion left her anxious, frustrated, and desperate for a way to reclaim control. Emily understood that the next step would require strategy, evidence, and careful patience. Emily finally confronted Frank with the house deed, certain the papers would end the dispute immediately. She placed them on the kitchen table, her hands trembling, her voice steady but tense. Frank glanced at the papers, then laughed, saying they were just pieces of paper and meant nothing. Emily insisted, telling him he had no claim and that the house legally belonged to her alone. Linda watched silently, her eyes darting between Emily and Frank, offering no protection or support. Frank's expression shifted, darkening, as if Emily had crossed a line he thought untouchable. He suddenly slapped her across the face, hard enough to leave her reeling and gasping. Emily stumbled back, shock freezing her movements, pain sharp and immediate. Her mother did nothing, standing like a shadow, unable or unwilling to intervene. Frank loomed over her, speaking with a calm fury that made her fear the moment could escalate further. He said she was ungrateful, that she had no idea what family really meant, and the papers were meaningless. Emily's vision blurred, anger and fear mingling into a hot, unbearable tension. She realized at that moment she was utterly alone in her own home. Every previous warning, every uneasy feeling, now coalesced into the stark truth. Frank had moved beyond manipulation. He had entered the realm of physical control. Emily could feel the walls closing in, as if the house itself sided with him against her. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to steady her shaking hands and rapid heartbeat. Frank continued, mocking her, reminding her she had no allies, that she could not defend herself alone. Linda finally spoke, softly, but only to calm Frank, not to help her daughter. Emily's heart sank, but her mind began racing, realizing action had to come from her alone. She recalled every violation, every small encroachment that had escalated into this moment. Every manipulation, every lie spread to neighbors, had led to this undeniable confrontation. She felt a surge of clarity amidst the shock, knowing Frank had overstepped in a way that could not be ignored. Emily noticed his arrogance, his belief that no law or authority could touch him in her house. The slap had been both a warning and a mistake, exposing him completely in front of her eyes. She saw that his rage could be documented, his words and actions recorded for future defense. Emily gathered her composure, reminding herself that anger alone was not enough. Evidence was power. She replayed every detail in her mind, forming a mental timeline that could be used later. Frank, confident in his domination, continued to belittle her, unaware she was observing and remembering everything. He bragged about the control he had gained, thinking she would crumble entirely under fear. Emily remained silent outwardly, nodding occasionally, letting him speak while nodding every incriminating word. The room felt charged, tense, as if holding its breath for the next inevitable escalation. Emily realized her mother's inaction was permanent. She could not rely on family to intervene. The isolation hit her, sharp and bitter, reinforcing the necessity to act strategically. She understood that confrontation alone would not reclaim her home. Preparation and proof were essential. Frank's self-assured tone, the physical aggression, the dismissive gestures, all became pieces of a larger plan. Emily vowed silently to herself that this violation would not go unanswered. She would collect proof, witness every statement, document every action. The house had been invaded, her autonomy challenged, but the battle was far from over. Emily's resolve hardened. She would fight not with emotion alone, but with precision and preparation. Frank had revealed his methods, his arrogance, and his contempt. Emily now had the map to counter him. The confrontation marked a turning point. She was no longer naive, no longer passive. The threat of violence had illuminated the path she needed to take, a path of careful, strategic resistance. Emily left the room, her mind sharp, her determination absolute, ready to turn the tables on Frank. Emily began collecting every document that proved her ownership and control over the house. She scanned the deed, mortgage statements, insurance policies, and tax records into a secure folder. Each receipt and bill became a weapon, evidence of her consistent responsibility and payment. She created a detailed timeline of Frank's actions, noting every violation, every manipulation. Emily started writing down exact quotes she remembered from Frank, every boast and threat. She knew his words could be as damaging as his actions if properly documented. Video recordings became her next step, capturing him claiming, "This is my house," repeatedly. Emily realized these statements could directly challenge his false narrative of shared ownership. She reached out to Jason, a friend from college who was now a lawyer, for guidance and strategy. Jason advised her to build a paper fortress before initiating any legal action against Frank. Emily labeled each file, each document meticulously, knowing organization was crucial for credibility. She reviewed the house's past correspondence, including letters, emails, and maintenance requests. Emily even collected witness statements from neighbors who had seen Frank overstep boundaries. She created a binder with photographs showing how he had moved in and altered her space. Every picture showed evidence of intrusion, clutter, and his unauthorized changes. Emily drafted a statement describing how Frank had escalated from small invasions to physical aggression. She included the incident when he slapped her, noting the date, time, and witnesses present. Emily stored all her digital files in multiple secure locations, fearing he might attempt to destroy them. She backed up videos and scanned documents to cloud storage with strong encryption. Emily also prepared copies for Jason, ensuring he could act immediately if court intervention was needed. She learned about filing a quiet title action to legally remove any claim Frank might assert. Jason explained that with sufficient documentation, the court would recognize her sole ownership. Emily rehearsed how to present her evidence clearly, knowing clarity could make or break her case. She created a spreadsheet, tracking every instance of Frank claiming authority or disrupting the house. Emily included dates, descriptions, quotes, and potential witnesses for each incident listed. She even recorded minor interactions, understanding that patterns could prove intent and behavior. Emily checked every piece of evidence for accuracy, avoiding anything that could be dismissed in court. She prepared a concise summary to accompany the full evidence, highlighting key violations. Emily also secured copies of utility bills, showing her continued sole responsibility for payments. She compiled photographs of mail, deliveries, and personal items Frank had moved or damaged. Emily created a folder of all communications, including text messages and emails, where he made threats. She began drafting a formal request for a restraining order to prevent further intrusions. Emily worked late nights, methodically building a case that could not be ignored or refuted. She kept a personal journal, recording her daily observations of Frank's behavior in real time. Emily labeled sections carefully: intrusion, manipulation, social coercion, physical aggression. She recorded Frank's words during confrontations, knowing they could serve as self-incriminating evidence. Emily even captured moments when he admitted assumptions about the court siding with him. She collected supporting statements from friends who had witnessed his overreach firsthand. Emily reviewed the timeline repeatedly, ensuring there were no gaps or inconsistencies. She created a comprehensive folder showing her sole responsibility for mortgage, taxes, and bills. Emily practiced explaining the situation clearly, anticipating challenges or questions from legal authorities. She organized evidence to show both pattern and escalation of Frank's behavior over time. Emily knew patience and precision were essential. Rushing could weaken her position. She double-checked every document, every recording, and every witness account for accuracy. Emily finally felt a sense of control returning, knowing she had built an unshakable foundation. Her preparation made her confident that the next confrontation with Frank could be decisive. She was ready to move forward, armed with evidence, strategy, and a lawyer she could trust. Emily no longer feared his manipulation because she had built a fortress of facts around her. The house, her home, was no longer just a place to live. It had become a battlefield she was prepared to win. Frank announced a family meeting in the living room, insisting Emily attend immediately. He claimed it was to discuss shared ownership, though Emily knew it was a trap. Emily brought a small recorder hidden in her bag, ready to capture everything he said. Frank began the meeting with a confident smile, acting as though he controlled the room. He presented a folder and demanded Emily sign a document calling the house family property. Emily sat quietly, pretending to read other papers, letting him speak without interruption. Frank leaned back, confident she would acquiesce under pressure and social manipulation. He told her the court would never favor a single woman without a family, implying weakness. Emily nodded occasionally, keeping her expression neutral while recording every word. He explained the document was meant to formalize his share, as if it were already agreed upon. Frank said she would be seen as ungrateful or cruel if she refused to sign. He repeated phrases about family loyalty, twisting them to justify his demands. Emily stayed silent, letting him reveal his own mindset while thinking he was convincing her. Frank grew more insistent, using guilt and fear, assuming compliance was inevitable. He said the paper would protect him from losing access to the home he helped maintain. Emily's recorder captured his admission that he believed the court would side with him. He outlined reasons the document was necessary, admitting he sought to legitimize his claim. Frank stated explicitly that she had no choice if she wanted to avoid social condemnation. Emily took mental notes, feeling a surge of validation as he revealed his true intentions. Every word he spoke became evidence, confirming the manipulations Emily had suspected. Frank tried to intimidate her with volume, gestures, and veiled threats, assuming control. Emily remained calm, letting his own arrogance build a case against him in real time. He said signing was for her own good, showing no awareness that his statements incriminated him. Emily silently reviewed each claim, comparing them with her documents and recordings. Frank boasted that even the neighbors would support his version of events, unaware of the recorder. He implied she could face social isolation if she resisted, further exposing his manipulative tactics. Emily realized that his overconfidence would be her strongest ally in court. Frank repeated that the house was meant to be shared, though he had no legal right. He admitted he thought Emily's gender and marital status would weaken her legal position. Emily continued pretending to review papers, keeping the recorder positioned discreetly. Frank laughed at the idea of her resistance, boasting about how easy it would be to manipulate her. He tried to convince her with logic and charm, unaware that every argument was now documented. Emily observed his behavior, gestures, and tone, knowing all could be used as evidence later. Frank's voice grew louder, more aggressive, but Emily remained composed, recording diligently. He finally leaned forward, repeating the demand to sign the document, using emotional pressure. Emily held the recorder steady, capturing his insistence, threats, and admissions verbatim. Frank believed she had no preparation, no legal support, and no way to fight back. Emily knew he had revealed everything she needed to dismantle his claims legally. She left the meeting without signing, her silence a quiet victory over his false confidence. Emily felt a sense of power returning, knowing she now had concrete proof of his intentions. The recording and his words became the final pieces she needed for the legal battle ahead. Frank's self-assurance had backfired completely, exposing the strategy he thought was secret. Emily now held the upper hand, ready to use the evidence to reclaim her home and authority. She walked away from the meeting, confident and resolute, prepared for the confrontation to come. Emily refused to sign, leaving Frank stunned and exposed in front of witnesses. She held the recorder tightly, knowing it captured every incriminating word he spoke. Her evidence was complete: documents, videos, witness statements, and his own admissions. Emily felt a wave of relief mixed with determination, finally in control of the situation. The house was still hers, and for the first time, she believed she could reclaim it fully. Frank's confidence had crumbled, leaving him vulnerable to legal consequences he never imagined. Emily contacted Jason, her lawyer, and presented the entire case with precision and clarity. Every violation, every claim, every manipulative tactic was documented and ready for court. She felt empowered, knowing the law and truth were firmly on her side this time. The upcoming legal battle no longer felt daunting. She was prepared and resolute. Emily had built her life with effort and care, and now she had the means to protect it. Frank could no longer intimidate her or twist the narrative in his favor. The house, her sanctuary, was reclaimable through strategy, evidence, and perseverance. Emily smiled, feeling a sense of justice already beginning to take shape. She had survived manipulation, social pressure, and violence, emerging stronger and wiser. The next steps were clear: present the evidence, secure the court's protection, and regain her home. For the first time in months, Emily felt peace, knowing she was no longer powerless. Her home, her life, and her autonomy were hers to defend and reclaim completely. Emily walked through her house, each room a symbol of her resilience and determination. The battle was just beginning, but this time she was ready to win.